So on this first one, step by step, first step, simplify with both sides completely. When you're solving, it's always about simplifying first. Technically, you always got to simplify. And how you simplify is order of operation. What is 6 plus 2?
8.
Don't do it. You have to multiply before you add. If you do 6 plus 2 first, you'll never get this question right. You have to multiply before you can add. Addition is going to happen last. It's 2 times the parentheses, so you're going to distribute the 2. Bring down again from left to right, bring steps down from top to bottom. Down to 6. Positive 2 times 5x is positive 10x. Positive 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. Equals. Talk yourself through it. Hear it in whether it's in your head or you're mumbling to yourself. But have that internal voice, that low auditory voice, say it as you're doing it because it will help. You slow down, you take care of your signs, and you actually write out the things that need to be written out. I will always hear from students saying, I understand it when you're doing it, but then I can't do it on my own. That's because I'm cueing you through every step. You're hearing it as you're seeing it. And hearing it as you're seeing it is helping you think about the next step, one step at a time, slowing you down. You got to do that for yourself. Equals. You know you can't add an 8x before 8. Bring down the 8x. And then we're going to distribute 4. Positive 4 times 2x is positive 8x. Positive 4 times positive 3 is a plus 12. Simplify both sides completely. Remember, step 1 might have multiple steps. We're not done until it's simplified. So on the left side, 10x, and then positive 6 and a negative 8. So 10x, 6 minus 8 is a minus 2, or negative 2. That's what I have on the left-hand side. I have a positive 10x and a negative 2 equals. On the right-hand side, an 8x and an 8x, 16x, plus 12. Now it's simplified. Left side, right side, you can't go any further. So now step 2. And remember, your quizzes are open notes. So you have this example, or whatever other notes you have, to use as a model to how you should work your quiz. On your test, though, it's you and what you have practiced and have muscle memory put together for your test. Step 2, gather your variable terms on one side. Focus on the variables, and then we're going to get the constants, the numbers on the other side. So focus on the variables. We're either going to gather all the variables, the x's, bring them over to the left, and think that through. I'm going to subtract 16x from both sides. That means 10x minus 16x. Or I can take the variables to the right, subtract 10x, 16x minus 10x. It doesn't matter, but you got to make a decision. So we're going to go to the right or to the left? To the left. So we're going to subtract 16x. Be careful with your signs. Positive 10x minus 16x is negative 6x minus 2 still equals, that's a positive 12. And if the constant, the variable is going to be on the left, we're going to have to add 2 and take it over to the right. We want to separate the variable terms, get them on one side, but constants on the other side. On the left, we have a negative 6x equals 14. That's step 2. Separate variables and constants. And then step 3, undo multiplication and or division. This is multiplication. Negative 6 times x. We want x. So to undo multiplication, we divide both sides by negative 6. It's not add 6, it's divide by negative 6 because it's multiplying times the x. To undo multiplication, we divide. Negative 6 times x divided by negative 6. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 is positive 1x. So that x equals a positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative. And you have to reduce the fraction. 14 and 6, that's 2 times 7 over 2 times 3. The 2's reduced, so it's negative 7 over 3. At the bottom of the box, x equals, the final answer needs to be written over here. Negative 7 over 3. And you can, have negative 7 over 3 out in front. You could have negative 7 over positive 3. You could have 7 over negative 3. As long as there's one negative, the answer is negative. Any questions? Step 2 is another solve. This one has fraction. Step 1, simplify both sides completely. Undo fractions if we have fractions. And we undo the fractions by multiplying by the least common denominator. To undo this fraction, I'd have to multiply by 2. But if I multiply everybody by 2, this 2 is not going to undo a 4. So 2's not the least common denominator. To undo a 4, I have to multiply everybody by 4. But a 4 is not going to undo that 8. So 4 is not the least common denominator. So you have a 2, a 4, and an 8. What is the least common denominator for the 2 and the 4?
8.
No, the 2 and the 4. 4. The first thing that would undo a 2 and a 4 would just be a 4. But now you have the 8. What's the first number what is the least common denominator to undo a 4 and an 8? Now we have the 8. So the least common denominator that would undo a 2, a 4, and an 8 is 8. Because 2 goes into 8, 4 goes into 8, and 8 will go into 8. That's the smallest number. If you use the smallest number, you have less of a mess. Can you multiply 2 times 4 is 8, 8 times 8 is 64, and use 64? Yeah. But you'll have big numbers that you got to crunch. Your final answer will just reduce to the final answer. You will get the final answer, but you have a lot of reducing. That's not the best way to do it, but it is a possible way to do it. So the least common denominator here is an 8. Please, when I say multiply each term by 8, that actually means I expect you to write it out. I expect you to go, all right, this 1 times 8, this 1 times 8, this 1 times 8, and then this 1 times 8. I don't want you to go, all right, I'll put an 8 way over here, and then let's do the rest of my head. Where you don't show the work where it's multiplying each 1 times 8. I see it. I see it all the time. Because when you put it over here, okay, 8 times this one, the 2 goes into the 8, and then the 4 goes into the 8, and then you try to do the rest of it in your head, and you're not seeing it, and that's where little mistakes happen, and they don't get the right answer. Just multiply each one. Because now, this 2 goes into that 8 4 times, we got a 4x left over. minus. This 4 goes into that 8 2 times. 2 times 3x, what does 6x? Equals 8 times 5x. And don't forget, you gotta multiply every term by the 8. So even though this does not have a fraction, you still multiply by 8. 8 times 5x, that's 40x. Minus. The 8 reduce, all we have is a minus 7. No more fractions. We're still in step 1, simplify both sides completely. On the left, what do I have? 4x minus 6x. Negative 2x equals 40x minus 7. That's step 1. Step 2. Gather your variables on one side, constant on the other side. So I want to get the x's on one side. Think it through. I can take this negative 2x over to this side because I would add it and I'd have positive x's. But then if I do that, if I add 2x to this side, then everything is on the right and I would have 0 on the left. I'd have my x's and a negative 7 over here. So I'd have to add 7 and bring it to this side. So I can separate my number from the variable. Or I could just bring the x's to the left, and in that one move, x's are on the left, number on the right. So think it through before you do it. Just like playing checkers, move the checker. What's going to happen if I do it this way? Left or right? Eight to the right. Gotta be careful with sign. Subtract 40x. And I tell you, please make sure when you do this, this is not the same thing. That just means either you don't get it or you're lazy. Subtracting 40 from 40x does not undo 40x. They're not like that. Subtract 40x from both sides. Details matter. Negative 2x, but negative 2x minus 40x is negative 42x. So here's negative 7. Negative 42 times x equals negative 7. Step 2 is done. Step 3, undo multiplication and or division. This is multiplication. Negative 42 times x. What are we doing with this? Divide both sides by negative 42. So positive x is equal to a negative over a negative. My answer is going to be a positive. So I think about the sign first. It's going to be a positive number. And then I have to reduce this fraction. The common factor of a 7 and 42 is a 7. This is 7 times 1 over 7 times 6. The 7 is reduced and I get 1 over 6. 1/6. At the bottom of the box, x equals is waiting for you. Final answer goes here, 1/6. Any clarification there? One step at a time. Once you undo the fractions, it's not a bad problem. And to undo the fractions, what's the least common denominator? Multiply each one. We'll have a question like this. Great, I just simplified, it's not an equation. So 15 plus square root of negative 147 minus 5 minus square root of negative 12. Order of operations. First of all, and before I get into order of operation, make sure you know exactly what the question wants. That is a subtraction problem. Do not do the rainbows. Do not taste the rainbows. This is not a Skittles question. Okay? You're going to simplify the parentheses. You're going to add or subtract whatever you get. Which means we need like terms. We need like radicals. You can only add like terms. Real number with real number. And we have square root negatives. So we're going to simplify those square root negatives. Now, what I'm looking at is that's square root 147. That's bothering. So, you know what? I doubt that really heavy set, balding guy with glasses in the front of the room is going to give us something I can't combine. Which one looks easier to simplify? The square root of negative 12 or the square root of negative 147? The negative 12. So I bet if I can simplify that one, it might give me a hint as to what the square root of negative 147 should be. Okay, so I'm going to work on the easier one, and that will give you a clue about the one that looks a little more menacing. And that's fine. But again, I want to make sure I do it right underneath. It's going to be minus this parentheses, 5 minus. First thing you want to do, square root of a negative, is you want to poke out the I. The square root of the negative is poking out the I. And then you focus on the 12. That 12 is a 4 times 3. And then you get a 2 times 2 and a 3. So a 2 breaks out with the I, 2I. There's a leftover 3 that's inside and left behind in the radical. So the square root of negative 12 is 2I squared root 3. Now, if this is going to add up with that, this is going to have an I squared root 3. That's the only way I'm going to be able to combine them together. They have to be the same kind of radical. It's got to have an I, which that's the I. It's got to have an I, and it's got to have a square root 3. Like terms. So bring this one down. This is a 15, and there's a plus. I know I'm going to poke out the I, square root of negative. And I know I'm going to need a 3 left over inside the radical. So that means I'm going to try, let's factor by 3. If I have to have a 3 left over, I should be able to divide by 3. Use your calculator, or if you recognize, this is 3 times 49. And I know it's 3 times 49 because 147 is almost 150. 150 is 3 times 50. And it's 147 is just 3 short, 1 3 less than 150. So instead of 3 times 50, it's 3 times 49. If you have to do things in your head, you start seeing things, you start thinking about things. Okay. I think that's when I got my first accident. I was thinking about those and I don't know what was it. No. So then I got 3. And then I got 7 times 7. A 7 escapes. So there's a 7 out here. 7i is broken out. And square root 3 left behind. 7i squared. So I do have an I squared 3 and an I squared. Simplify first. So the parentheses, this one is done, so I'm gonna drop the parentheses. 15 plus 7 squared root. And because it's subtraction, we distribute the negative and these signs will change. A negative times a positive 5 is now -5. A negative times negative 2i squared 3 is now positive 2i squared 3. And what's going to happen is you are going to combine the real numbers with the real numbers and the imaginary with the imaginary. You do not have to write out the next step, and I'll write it out after I do this. The real number 15 minus that real number 5. 15 minus 5, that's a 10. And then I have 7 of these I squared root, and then 2 more of the I squared root. Since those are the same kind of terms, 7 of them plus 2 of them adds up to 9 of those I squared root. And that's the final answer. If you have to, so you see it better, then all you technically would need to do is put the real numbers next to each other. Put the imaginary numbers next to each other. The commutative property of addition, A plus B is the same as B plus A. You can switch the order. 5 plus 8 is the same as 8 plus 5. With subtraction, however, as long as you keep the sign, 5 minus 2 is the same as negative 2 plus a 5. On this side, you have a positive 5 and a negative 2. On this side, you have a negative 2 and a positive 5. I can trade positions as long as the signs are the same. I want to switch these two. There's my positive 15. There's a negative 5. Now I have a positive 7i squared root 3. And I have a positive 2i squared root 3. So now at least you have them right next to each other. The 15 minus 10, sorry, 15 minus 5, okay. 7 of those I root 3s, 2 of the I root 3s. You don't have to do this. You can do it right here. But if you need to do it, the goal is to get it right. Any questions there? Okay, that problem, make sure you do not multiply. It's a subtraction question. Over here, that's a multiplication question. And these examples are exactly like this. The one where you do addition or subtraction, you'll have something left behind inside the rabbit. It will not be a perfect square. But where you have to do the multiplication, there'll be nice, happy, perfect squares there. Well, this is the quiz. Maybe on the test that we do. We have 8 square root 4 plus 5 square root negative 25 times 3 square root 64 minus 4 square root negative 1. Keyword on simplify. It's about order of operations. First thing you got to clean up is what's inside the parentheses. Oh, look how nice. 8 is a getaway car. That's an 8 times square root of 4. What's the square root of 4? That's an 8 times 2 plus Getaway car, that's a 5. Times. Poke out the I. Square root of the negative, you want to poke out the I. And then what's the square root of the 25? So 5. So that square root negative 25 is 5i. So this times the next one. Getaway car is 3. What's the square root of 64? That's an 8. Minus, we have a 4. Don't forget to bring down those coefficients. That's what I see people not bring down everything, because they're not working from left to right. All they're doing is saying, oh, square root negative 100. They forget about the 4, they don't write it down. Negative 4 times, let's see what breaks out. So you're going to poke out the I, and then what's the square root of 100? 10, that's 10i. And we're not done simplifying. Don't multiply it. This is 8 times 2 is 16, plus 5 times 5i is 25i. And this is going to be 24 minus 4 times 10i is 40i. And that's a lot nicer to multiply together than the original question. Say it one more time. Order operations, parentheses first. And do the whole thing, clean it up as much as you can. And I write this question here, just like I wrote it on the quiz. Same type of different number. Your question on the quiz will have nice perfect squares, just like you're seeing here. So you're not going to end up having to go, all right, something like this, 7i squared 3 times negative 2i squared 3. You might have it on a test question next week, but not right now. I don't want to destroy confidence yet. So we distribute. Now, because this is a little bit of a different problem, I'm going to write it out. I'm not going to use a calculator. I'm going to write it out. First times first, I get 16 times the 24. Positive times the positive. And then I'm going to have a positive times the negative. So it's going to be minus 16 times that negative 40i. So it's a negative 16 times 40i. And then we have a positive times a positive, so that's a positive 25i times 24. So 20, oh, that's fine. 25i times 24. The trickiest part is last times last. The sign. I have a positive times a negative, so it's going to be a negative. 25i times 40i. 25i times 40i. We'll see why that gets real tricky. But first of all, the sign. It's a negative. Okay, this. 16 times 24. 16. Is 384. All right. And then this is going to be minus, that's 640 times I. And then this is going to be plus 600i. And that's gonna be minus 25 times 40 is 1,000 I squared. 25 times 40 is 1,000. I times I is I squared. The I squared is really important there. You do not have to show this step right here. You don't have to show this one. You can do from here to here, 16 times 24, 384. 16 times negative 48, just make sure you have the right sign. Positive, positive, 25 times 25i times 24, 600i. Positive times a negative, just keep the sign right. Negative 25 times 40 is 1,000, and don't forget it's going to be an I squared. But there's 384. These are two like terms. Negative 640, positive 600 is negative 40i. And then this is why the last piece is a little more intense. Negative 1,000, and then what is I squared?
-1.
Negative 1. So this ends up being a negative 1,000 times a negative 1. So right here, positive 1,000. So the last thing you have to do, 384 plus 1,000 is 1,384 minus 45. One step at a time. You're only multiplying two numbers at one time. 16 times the 24. 16 times the negative 49. 25i times the 24. 25i times negative 49. Then you're only adding two numbers at a time. These two are the only ones you can add. You got to simplify that one. You have to remember that when you multiply 25i times negative 40i, you're going to get the I squared. Then it becomes -1. I hate when I see too many shortcuts. I'll see 25i times negative 40i, and then you try to go, okay, that's a -1, that's going to be a negative, and you try to make the sign right here all in one step. And I'm going to go, how'd you get that? Where'd that come from? I want to see the word. Don't question. Where'd the I go? You can't get to the -1 unless you have the I squared first. All right, what is your call? What do you want to see? Now, last week on the quiz prep, we did number 4 and the 10B bonus. So at 10:55, the plan is to do questions until 11:20 during the 10 o'clock class. So we'll do more questions at 10, but I'll do whatever you want to see for the next 10 minutes. Yeah, I'll show you whatever. Which one? Pick one. We did 10B. And number 6 is not a quiz question. Number 6 is a bonus type. So 1 through 5 and number 7 are quiz questions. Line one,
No, so. Those are the answers to the question. But these are bonuses or. Yeah. Last week. Yeah.
nine B,
Okay.
yeah. So nine B, 5 over x minus 4 plus 1 over x plus 4. First, when you have a question like this, if you have x in the denominator, you have to think first before you can start. Because x is in the denominator, you might get an extraneous solution. A number or an answer where it works in the problem that doesn't have fraction, but we can't use it in the original question. So just be aware, what x would make this denominator 0? Positive 4, and what would make this one? So if we get an x equal to a -4 or a +4, we would have to throw them out. We can't. And that's just thinking ahead, just in case. All right, it's got fraction. We undo the fraction. To undo the fractions, we need right there, least common denominator. So if you think it through, to undo this fraction, you'd have to multiply by an x minus 4. That will undo that fraction. But an x minus 4 is not going to undo x plus 4, and it's not going to undo x squared minus 4. So I need something else. To undo the x plus 4, I also need to multiply by an x plus 4 to undo this denominator. So I only need to multiply by an x plus 4 as well. So everybody should get multiplied by an x plus 4 and an x minus 4. But hold on. W. Wilson, Philip, 1989. You will need to know what I'm talking about. I need to undo x squared minus 4. So I guess I got to multiply by x squared minus 4 as well. Or do. So let's think for a second. That's a lot of stuff to multiply by. Hello, factor. X squared minus 4 has to start ringing a bell. X squared is a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square, and that's subtraction. This is a squared minus b squared. And we get a squared minus b squared when we multiply a plus b times a minus b. So x is squared. So this would be x times x. It's a minus, so it would have to be plus minus. 4 is a perfect square. That would be 2 times 2. x squared minus 4 is x plus 2 times x. I'm sorry, this is not, this is 16. I wrote it down wrong earlier this morning. I wrote it down wrong again. This is a 16. So x plus 4, x minus 4. What makes this denominator here? It is actually these two. I don't need to multiply by x squared minus 16 because this will go into that. This is really, I'm just going to save a little space. It's x plus 4 times x minus 4. That's what the x squared minus 16 actually is. It's a bonus question. I'm not going to give you a problem where it's not going to be that. Promise. In fact, you're looking at exactly the same type of question I'm going to ask you as a bonus question. Maybe it's not x squared minus 16, but it will be something very similar to it. So this is my least common denominator. Every term needs to get multiplied individually by the x plus 4, x minus 4. Don't just, don't be lazy about it and write it once out here and think you can simplify. Because here we're going to reduce. The x minus 4 reduces, and we're left with a 5 times that x plus 4. Plus the x plus 4 reduces, and I'm left with, I'm going to write this out, but you're going to be left with x minus 4 times 1, which is just x minus 4. But let's, just in case it's not a 1, you'd be left with this times that x minus equals. Here, x plus 4 and x plus 4 reduce. X minus 4 reduces with x minus 4. All we have left is a 2. No more fractions. Least common denominator undoes the fraction. Step 1 is simplify both sides completely. All we did was undo the fractions. Now we got to finish simplify. Distribute the 5. 5x, just 5 times x, 5x. 5 times positive 4, positive 20. And again, you wouldn't write out 1 times x minus 4. We would just write x. But just in case it wasn't, this is your habit. 1 times x is plus x. 1 times negative 4 is minus 4 equals 2. And then last step for simplifying. This is all step 1. 5x plus x, 6x. 20 minus 4 is positive 16 equals 2. So now we're simplifying. Step 2, separate x and the constant. So either, well, let's do it this way. There's all your x's. There's no other x. Leave it here. Let's take 16 to the right. So we have to subtract 16 from both sides. 6x equals 2 minus 16. What's that? Negative 14. And then divide both sides by 6. X is equal to a negative over a positive is a negative. Reduce your fractions to lowest terms. That's 2 times 7 over 2 times 3. So it's negative 7 over 3. Anytime we have fractions, I keep saying, undo the fractions, least common denominator. Whether it looks like that or looks like that. Question we didn't do. Okay, so I'm back at 10.